Welcome to the FinTech One-on-One podcast, episode number 390. This is your host, Peter Renton, chairman and co-founder of FinTech Nexus. Before we get started, I want to remind you about our comprehensive news service. FinTech Nexus News not only covers the biggest FinTech news stories, our daily newsletter delivers the 10 most important FinTech stories into your inbox every morning. And we have special editions for Latin America as well as UK and Europe. Stay on top of FinTech news by subscribing at news.fintechnexus.com/subscribe. Today on the show, we are talking small business data with Pete Lord, the CEO and co-founder of Codat. Now, Codat calls themselves the universal API for small business data, and we break down exactly what that means. We talk about the different types of data that they work with, talk about why this connectivity is so important. We talk about the different use cases. We dig into the lending use case, which is a really major one. We talk about the different geographies they operated in and why this is a global phenomenon, this challenge around small business data. We talk about some of the names that they're working with, some of the big names. We also talk about climate data, which I thought was really interesting, and the opportunities that is going to present. We also talk about their recent fundraise and much more. It was a fascinating discussion. Hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the podcast, Pete.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
Okay, my pleasure. So let's get into it by giving the listeners a little bit of background about yourself. I'd love to get kind of the highlights of your career. I know you're still fairly young, so you haven't had a long career, but I know you've been in fintech for a while. So give us some of the highlights.
So I studied computer science at university, and I spent a few years as a software engineer before I moved into product management. And that experience was all at a company in the UK called Market Finance. Previously, they were called Market Invoice, and they're a small business lender. And it's through that experience, actually, that I saw the need for Codat, that I saw the problem. And that problem was twofold. First of all, there's a business problem. And that is that if you're lending money to small businesses, then you need accurate and up-to-date data on them in order to have confidence to make that lending decision. And one of the ways that you can do that is by building integrations into the systems that these SMBs are using already to run their business and track their performance. But that kind of brings us to the second part of the problem, which is the technical one. I don't know if you've tried building integrations. It's pretty thankless work. And that's because you're spending time adding new product features and working on functionality that only kind of a small subset of your users benefit from. And actually, the more integrations you build, the worse it gets. They're harder to build because the products that you're connecting to are poorly documented, because they're less mature. And fewer of your customers actually benefit from the work that you're doing. And so we've got these two problems, the business one and the technical one. And me and my two co-founders who shared the same experience started Codat to solve these. The idea being if we can build these integrations, then other SMB fintechs don't have to, and they can benefit in terms of getting their products to market faster and building better applications.
Right. So then maybe let's dig into that a little bit, because I notice you call yourself the universal API for small business data. And so maybe you could describe exactly what you mean there.
So let's break it down. Universal, to me, in this context, it means one to many. So we have a standardized data model. So through our one API connection, our clients can connect to the many different systems that we've built integrations to. And this is accounting, e-commerce, point of sale, and payments platforms used by SMBs. Universal API for small business data. So API is next. We're an API first business, whilst the value of our connectivity might be measured in terms of a business metric, like decreasing the time that it takes for a small business to go through an application journey, or increasing the amount of money that can be lent by a lender. It's developers who are actually using our technology and the product itself. And small business data. So we do connect to some, built integrations to some ERP systems used by larger corporates. Our sweet spot is really very firmly in the S of the SMB segment. They're difficult to universally put a label on it, but we're talking kind of tens of employees, tens of millions of dollars of revenue and below, typically.
Right.
But these small businesses still use over 40 different tools to run their business on average. So that need for connectivity is still there. And for our clients, there's huge benefits of scale. If you can automate processes, there's a lot of time and money to be saved, not just for SMBs, but for our clients.
So I imagine you're integrating with QuickBooks, you're integrating with Xero and other accounting software, and then Shopify, right? I think you said 4 different categories. Maybe you can give some examples within each category of some of the companies where you have an API connection.
Our origins, and I guess kind of what's bread and butter for us, is the accounting and bookkeeping connectivity. So QuickBooks Online, Xero, Sage, NetSuite, these types of platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And then our commerce API systems like you mentioned, Shopify is a great example of an e-commerce platform. Stripe in terms of payments, something like Square in terms of points of sale. And actually via our partners, we provide banking data connectivity as well. That's the data infrastructure part of it. What's really interesting is that as time goes on, we're building more and more what we would call feature products on top of that data infrastructure. One of them, Assess, for example, it combines the data from these different data sets to give our clients something that's greater than the sum of the parts, and that they can start to get insight and intelligence from how these data sets can be married together.
Right. And so I imagine a lot of your clients, lenders, banks, we'll get into that in a little bit, but they have a customer comes along who wants to borrow money, then they go to you, and that one client may have maybe on Shopify, maybe on Stripe, maybe on QuickBooks, whatever. So I presume they'll say, right, give us everything you got. Is that how it works? Or do they say, I want QuickBooks data, I want whatever? Obviously the small business is typing in their credentials, I imagine. So you've got to be able to get access to that data. But maybe you can just take us through a little example about how it actually works.
One of the most common misconceptions is that the small business is sharing their data with Codat. That's not how it works. We're completely white labeled. You could think of us as part of our client's tech stack. A small business is consenting to share their data with a nominated third party. That's Codat's client, the people who've implemented our API. And then we provide the connectivity that enables that. And once that connection is established, then we can synchronize data both to and from. It's bidirectional between our client and the software system that's used by the SMB, like the QuickBooks or the Xero, as I described. Most of our clients are looking to enable all of our integrations. We've got over 30 of them because they want to provide the connectivity functionality to as many of their customers as possible. But in terms of the data, our clients control that to make sure that they're only requesting and accessing what is essential for their product to function. And so it's very much not a let's take everything. It's got to be explicit. We're big proponents of very clear communication and tight controls for the SMB in terms of data sharing. It's their data at the end of the day.
You're the connectivity piece that allows the lender, whoever is requesting this data. So you're just providing that, and then it just goes through your pipes, but you're not actually seeing it. Is that fair to say?
We see it, and because a large part of the value that we provide is that we're mapping that data to a standard format. So
right.
that when it reaches our lender, be it the fintech, be it the bank, then they actually don't need to be concerned as to kind of where it came from or where it's going to. It doesn't matter if it's a Xero user or a QuickBooks user or a NetSuite user. As far as they're concerned, it's one of their customers' data. and they can just focus on how they use that data, providing kind of greater value to the customer because they have access to it.
Right, right. And so, it's interesting because this really relies on like an open banking kind of mentality, or at least a framework. I think you started Codat after the open banking implementation happened in the UK. I know it took a while to kind of really get going, but you're a UK company. I know that you operate now in the US, and we can talk about that in a little bit, but I'd love you to kind of give us a sense. What's the state of play of open banking in the UK right now? And maybe you can just contrast it to what you see here in the US.
Open banking it's getting pretty mature in the UK. And it's really now just around continuing the growth of uptake and use in the market. I guess the biggest difference to me in terms of the UK and the US is that the UK has been more regulatory or legislatively led, whereas the US there's regulation for sure, but it's been much more commercially led with companies like Plaid as a great example, pushing the boundaries. There's a stat from FData that 30% of the US population have used apps that combine financial data. In the US, it's going really well. That will only continue to grow. For me, that kind of reinforces this view that regulation can be kind of a great accelerant, but it's certainly not essential. And I guess we see that because we're opening up accounting data, opening up commerce data, and the open sharing of this data isn't regulated in the UK or the US. And so we're still seeing traction. So for me, kind of the market readiness is less about regulation and much more around, are there SMBs that are open to sharing their data? Are there fintechs that are building innovative products using it, no matter kind of why or how it's been shared in the first place? And is there a problem to be solved that increased data portability can solve?
Right, right. What about continental Europe? Because I know you operate there as well. Is that similar to the UK, would you say?
I'd say similar. I think there are some countries where there's less of a tendency to connect your data and to share your system. So, for example, in Germany, we see in terms of SMBs, they're more hesitant to connect their software compared to the UK market, as an example.
Right. Okay. The challenges, though, I imagine, are universal. And what's your geographic footprint now? And are your challenges very different between countries? Because, I mean, some of the products you've been talking about, they're global. They're in many, many countries around the world. So I imagine that makes it a little easier. But tell us the geographic footprint and the challenges of working internationally.
There's a few different measures for Codat's footprint. Firstly, it's our team. So our team are based in the UK, in the US, and Australia. It's then, where are our clients based? The people who are connecting to our API. That's a little bit wider. We have clients in Canada, in the rest of Europe, and a dozen kind of dotted elsewhere around the world. And then it's, where are their small businesses located who are connecting via Codat's technology? And again, that's a little broader still. Our best fit in terms of connectivity is in the core markets where we have people and clients. But as you say, the software systems that we're talking about, some of them are very regional, but others are global by nature. Some of the challenges that come in are not unique to Codat in terms of connectivity, but there are others that are. And a big one, for example, for us is the way that tax is calculated and the different accounting standards around the world. And trying to standardize that to one model is a real challenge, but one that we've taken on.
Right. Particularly here in the US, where there's federal tax, there's state tax, and there's local county taxes. I know you began in the lending space, right? Is that still the primary use case? What other types of clients are you seeing?
That's where we've began. And the story of the last 5 years for Codat has really been about realizing the potential of the technology that we've built. It's what makes it fun and exciting to work at Codat, but also it's what makes it challenging. And for me, that challenge, it looks like, where do we focus? There are 42 different use cases for Codat that our clients are using us for at the moment. Everything from hedging FX to payroll reconciliation, from insurance to corporate cards, and many, many more. Some that I just wouldn't have expected 5 years ago, especially some of the vertical SaaS companies that are using us. I guess I mentioned focus. For us, there are a few particular areas of focus at the moment. That's expense management, point of sale, banks and lenders. So those are the areas where we're doubling down, making sure that we're really delighting clients. But the great thing about providing infrastructure is the improvements that we make for one sector, the benefits are felt kind of across the entire user base.
Right. Let's just talk about lending for a little bit. Maybe you could talk about this access to this lending data. Do you have any stats, or just what can you share about sort of helping small businesses get access to credit that maybe they wouldn't have had before they could connect all these data sources?
We've surveyed 800 SMBs and found that 73% of them had a negative perception of finance, and they gave reasons like it's expensive, it's hard to get, it's intimidating as to why. And in terms of SMBs and using data to kind of help close that lending gap, we can start with making it easier for small businesses that need funding but have put off applying because the process is onerous, or kind of, as some of the survey results said, intimidating. If we can make it so that in order to get access to a decision, SMBs can simply connect the software that they use to run their business and working towards instantly getting a yes or a no and a limit versus uploading documents and filling in forms, then that is definitely going to increase the access for SMBs. On the flip side, you've got the lender. For them, what we're able to offer, or rather the data that Codat makes available can offer, is we can improve the classification of the SMB for them, because we're using up-to-date data and much more granular than a bureau score or last year's audited accounts. Then they can put businesses in a smaller bucket. This is particularly true if a business has been growing. Rather than judging them on their performance 12 months ago, they can be judged on their performance as recently as last month or today. And perhaps actually now that business is, we take this up-to-date view of the world, that business is eligible for a product that they wouldn't be otherwise. The same is true in terms of when markets are changing. At the moment, we see lots of lenders probably feeling less confident about making lending decisions because of the uncertainty. Well, actually, we can give a very detailed, up-to-date view of a small business. Essentially, it's the same view that the small business owner has got themselves. Then they can have that confidence to make a decision, and they can make it quickly as well. Mm-hmm. We all know that SMBs, when they need cash flow, they need it now because they've got a client that they want to take on, and all they need to fulfill because they need to make payroll. And so giving lenders the ability to make confident decisions quickly is how we help.
So are you also connecting to bank data, or do you partner with Plaid, or is that something like, where do you kind of stand when it comes to bank data?
We partner with Plaid. They're actually one of our investors, also TrueLayer as well. Mm-hmm. Our view is there are some excellent companies that have built excellent products to connect to bank data. So we won't reinvent the wheel. Instead, we'll use them as building blocks and embed them into our product.
Right. So from the lender, can they connect to the bank through Codat, or do they need to separately go through Plaid, or how does it work?
They can do either. Lots of our clients do connect to kind of the banks via Codat. And that has the advantage that we can stitch the data together, as I mentioned briefly earlier. It's something we call cross-referencing. You can. The great thing about accounting data is that it's so rich, but a potential objection is that it's user-entered, it's mutable. And the banking data has the opposite characteristics. It's come direct from the bank. You know that these transactions have occurred, but all you have is the amount and the description. And categorization of bank transactions in the SMB world is really tricky.
Mhm.
But if we stitch these two data sets together, then we can have the trust that comes from the bank data combined with the context and the richness from the accounting system. And we can also layer on data from like an e-commerce platform or a payment solution as well, and get this really useful holistic view of an SMB.
Can you maybe expand on that a little bit? So what are you presenting back? Let's just use the lenders as an example. The lender, someone comes on, maybe they're connecting Shopify data, their bank data, the QuickBooks Online data. So you've got three pretty rich data sources. What do you present back to the lender exactly?
Lots of our clients are accessing the raw data that's come back from these systems. We have transformed, we've mapped it into a standard format to make it much more easy to use across clients using many different software systems. So the raw data is all there and made available. And there are many companies that utilize that really effectively, particularly some of the fintechs who've got kind of teams of data scientists and are set up to consume data really well in that format. But actually, the sheer quantity of the data can be its own worst enemy. It can be overwhelming to some. And so we've developed a product, it's called Assess, and it contains kind of metrics and key insights from the raw data. And it basically makes it much more easy to get at the meaning behind the data itself.
Right. Okay, so that's interesting. I want to talk about climate data for a second because it's a whole new area of data. It's becoming more important in Europe. I think the European Union has some mandates in place for small business data that's happening soon. US is not as far along where it comes to, but what are you doing on that front? Are you getting demand for that kind of data?
To be really honest, what is Codat doing? Not very much, but what are our clients doing?
Right.
Quite a lot. So we've got clients like Greenly, Greencast, and Dodo, and others. And these clients do different things, but a key kind of theme is calculating the carbon footprint of SMBs using consented data. So if you spend, or if a small business rather spends $100 on American Airlines, that probably has more of an impact on the environment than one that spends $100 on Microsoft Azure. But you can actually get much more granular and start looking at the accounts payable and accounts receivable ledgers of these businesses and actually start to track emissions much more accurately through the supply chain. This calculation of emissions, of the carbon footprint, it can also then be layered with a service to offset that as well. So it's a sector that we see growing. We're proud to be powering.
Right. That's going to be a very big growth area globally, but certainly starting in Europe, it seems, in the near future. I want to talk about your recent fundraise. So it was announced in June. I'm not sure when you actually closed it, but you had really big names in this fundraising process. You got, Index Ventures, you got PayPal, you got JP Morgan. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that fundraising process was like. And you did this in 2022, so that's an achievement in and of itself. But just tell us a bit about that process.
We closed it in Q2 of this year. So the announcement was pretty recent. And the investors who mentioned also Canopy and Shopify. The fundraise was, this was our Series C. So we've had this is kind of our third time round. And it was very similar to the A and the B. The due diligence was a little more onerous, as you'd expect, being a larger company and with a larger amount of money. But otherwise, not much different. The hardest part is just bringing together, in terms of timing, these very different organizations. But the one thing that is a common thread across them is their alignment with our mission. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what has already proven to be kind of the most valuable aspect of this round. And I think taking strategic investment in general is that the value that we're providing, kind of a centricity on small businesses and powering fintechs, is a common thread. We're really fortunate to be in a strong financial position going into what could be a tough period for many, but it's really the mission alignment that these organizations bring that's of greatest value to us.
Right. Got it. Can you give us a sense of the scale you guys are at today? Like, how many people you got on the team right now?
We're over 300, I believe about 330 right now. Most of our people, about 80% of them, are based in London. The remaining amount, we have a small team, small but growing, very important team out in Sydney. And then everyone else is in the US, mainly in New York.
Right. Okay. Good. Shout out to my hometown there. Great. Okay. So then let's maybe close with, I'd love you to kind of paint a vision for what a connected world can look like when it comes to, this SMB data, which, it's, let's face it, there's still some people, running QuickBooks on a PC that's sitting on their hard drive, all their data, and it's not even connected to the internet potentially. So, but I'd love you to kind of peer into your crystal ball and sort of take us out a few years and maybe combine it with sort of your vision for where Codat sits. What's a connected world going to look like?
Let's start with, it's our mission to make life easier for small businesses. It's our goal to connect to all of them. And what does it look like when we do that? I spend a lot of time talking about connectivity and the value of connectivity, but it's hard to visualize. One of the metaphors that I've used in the past is what Codat is doing. It's like we're building the internet for business data. And so right now, certainly going back a couple of years, it's very much felt like, we're in the world of dial-up from a kind of conventional internet sense. There's connectivity is there, but it's limited. Its usefulness is patchy. The world we're trying to take small businesses to is kind of where we are today with the internet, which is, it's 5G, it's effortless, it's everywhere. 10 years ago, we just couldn't have imagined. And actually, if you think about our consumer lives, we don't talk about where we've got phone reception much. We don't talk about kind of our internet speed. We don't talk about the products that we use that are and aren't connected to the internet. The only time we really notice it is when it's not there. Right. And it's hard to talk about because it's the absence of friction. This is kind of the world that we envisage, that we're trying to build towards. In 10 years' time, there's going to be no one on podcasts talking about integrations, and they won't be a marketable feature because they'll just be there. They'll be table stakes. They'll be so integral, and it's that's what we're trying to accelerate and to create.
Okay, well, it's a great mission. I think it's the benefits, obviously, to small businesses around the world, which are obviously an engine for economic growth everywhere. So thank you very much, Pete, for being on the show, and best of luck to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for having me.
It struck me when just reflecting on that conversation that so much of the world's data, particularly when it comes to small business or really any types of data, it sits in silos. And you've got your accounting data in its silo, you've got your e-commerce data in its silo, your banking data in another, and maybe you have shipping data or something else that's specific to your business. But those silos are going to end up becoming interconnected. As Pete said there, the integration is just going to become table stakes where all the silos will connect to each other. And I'm thinking when we have all of this data that's connected, the possibilities are endless, what we can do with that, get good data scientists onto it, and we will be able to kind of gain new insights that we've never had before, and there'll be new use cases for this data that we haven't even thought about yet. Anyway, on that note, I will sign off. I very much appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.